What if I told you that a girl the world rejected at 19? A pregnant girl chased out of her home. A girl who slept in an uncompleted building and sold oranges under the hot sun. Raised a child who would one day become a billionaire CEO. This is not just a story of success. It's a story of pain, promise, sacrifice, and destiny. One mother, one child, one unbreakable belief that tomorrow can be greater than today. Stay with us as we unfold this powerful journey. From roadside survival to global success. Like this story, if you believe hope can rise from nothing. Subscribe for more emotional, inspiring African success stories that will move your heart and fuel your dreams. You don't want to miss what happens next. Ayo was 19 when silence became louder than shouting. The day her parents discovered her pregnancy, the house felt smaller, tighter, like the walls themselves were judging her. Her mother wouldn't look at her. Her father's voice came sharp and final, cutting through the room like a blade. You have brought shame to this family. No questions, no listening, no mercy. At 5 months pregnant, Ayo's world ended in a single afternoon. Her clothes were thrown into a black nylon bag and dumped outside the gate. The door slammed behind her, and with it went every memory of childhood safety she had ever known. She stood there for a long time, one hand on her swollen belly, the other holding the bag that now carried her entire life. "Mummy, Daddy," she whispered, but the gate remained shut. The sun was already setting when she wandered into an uncompleted building at the edge of the street. Bare blocks stood like silent witnesses. No doors, no windows, just open rooms and cold cement. That night, Ayo curled up on the floor, her back against a wall, mosquitoes humming around her ears. She cried until her chest hurt. Then she placed both hands on her stomach. "I don't know where we're going," she whispered to the baby inside her, her voice shaking. "But I promise you, I will not let you suffer. One day we will be rich. One day this pain will make sense." The baby kicked softly, as if answering her. Morning came with hunger. Her stomach growled, but she ignored it. She walked the streets until her legs ached, searching for work, help, anything. People turned her away. Some stared, some mocked, some pretended she didn't exist. By afternoon, desperation pushed her to a fruit seller by the roadside. Ayo begged for oranges on credit. The woman studied her swollen belly, sighed, and handed her a small tray. "Sell and bring back my money," she said. That tray became Ayo's lifeline. She stood under the sun, calling out softly, "Sweet orange, fresh orange." Her feet hurt, her back ached, sweat soaked her clothes. Yet, each coin that dropped into her palm felt like hope. That night, she returned to the uncompleted building with a few naira in her hand and a fire in her heart. She lay down on the cement floor again, staring at the dark ceiling. "We survived today," she whispered to her unborn child. "Tomorrow will be better." In that broken building, with no bed, no family, and no certainty, a mother was born before the child ever arrived. And the journey, hard, painful, and extraordinary, had just begun. The nights grew heavier as Ayo's belly grew larger. Rain leaked through the open roof of the uncompleted building, dripping onto the floor where she slept. Sometimes she shifted her body just to avoid the puddles. Other nights, she stayed awake, counting mosquito bites and whispering prayers into the darkness. Still, every morning she picked up her tray. Oranges became her routine. Hunger became her companion. Hope became her weapon. She saved every coin carefully, hiding them inside a small torn purse she kept tied to her wrapper. Whenever fear crept in, she touched her belly and reminded herself, "You are not alone." One night, the pain came suddenly. At first, she thought it was the baby turning. But the pain grew sharper, stronger, waves that stole her breath. Ayo tried to stand, then fell back to the floor, sweat pouring down her face. "It's too early," she cried softly. "Please, not now." There was no phone to call, no neighbor to knock on the door, no hospital bed waiting for her, just her. The pain tore through her body as she screamed into her wrapper, biting her lips so no one would hear. Hours passed. Her voice became hoarse. Her strength faded. Then, in the deepest moment of pain, she remembered her promise. I will not fail you. With one final push, a cry filled the building, thin, shaky, but alive. Ao collapsed back, shaking, tears streaming down her face as she pulled the baby to her chest. Tiny boy, slippery, warm, breathing clearly. My son, she sobbed. You made it. She wrapped him in the only clean cloth she had and held him all night, afraid to sleep. When morning light entered through the broken windows, she stared at his tiny face and smiled through her tears. She named him Daniel. God has judged in my favor. The little money she had saved from orange selling became their lifeline. She bought pap, a little milk, and managed carefully, one day at a time. For 1 month, they survived quietly inside that broken building. But hunger doesn't wait forever. When the money finished, fear returned. Daniel cried from hunger, and Ao's heart broke each time she had nothing to give him. Still, she refused to beg. She tied Daniel tightly to her back with her faded wrapper and returned to the roadside. Her steps were slower now, her body weaker, but her spirit was stronger than ever. Sweet orange. She called out again, her baby sleeping against her back. Some customers stared. Some felt pity. A few bought more than they needed. Ao didn't know it then, but every step she took with that baby on her back was writing a future no one could imagine. The boy born on bare cement had survived his first battle, and his mother, thin, tired, unbroken, was just getting started. By the time Daniel turned 2, the uncompleted building no longer felt like a shelter. It felt like a cage. Ao had learned to live with hunger, but watching it touch her child was a pain she could not endure. Every night, as Daniel slept beside her on a thin mat someone had given her, she stared at his small chest rising and falling and wondered how long love alone could keep them alive. When a neighbor mentioned a small, cheap school down the street, Ao laughed at first. School? She said. I can barely feed him. But the woman insisted. At least he'll be safe there in the mornings. And who knows? That who knows stayed with Ao all night. 2 weeks later, Daniel wore a second-hand uniform that was slightly too big, and slippers that had seen better days. Ao paid the first term's fees with money she had saved over months. Money meant for food. That same week, she stopped selling oranges. Oranges were too slow, too small. Ao began cooking. Before dawn, she borrowed a small stove and pot. She made rice, beans, and stew in small portions and carried them to the roadside. The smell pulled customers in. By noon, her food was usually gone. She ate last. Sometimes not at all. Every afternoon, Daniel ran to her stall after school, counting her coins with serious eyes. Mummy, he said one day, you sold more today. She smiled. You noticed? He nodded proudly. Yes, tomorrow will be more. She didn't know why those words made her chest ache. By age 4, Daniel was different. While other children struggled with numbers, Daniel played with them. He counted plates, customers, coins, sometimes faster than Ao herself. Mummy, this one gave you too much change, he said one evening. Ao checked. He was right. Teachers began calling her aside. Your son is special, one said gently. He understands things far beyond his age. Ao would nod politely, but deep inside, fear mixed with pride. Special children needed opportunities. Opportunities needed money. And money was the one thing she never had enough of. Still, every night, she held Daniel close and whispered the same words she had said before he was born. One day you will not struggle like this. One day this road will be behind us. Daniel listened carefully, his small fingers gripping hers. I will help you, Mummy, he said seriously. Ao laughed, brushing his hair. You're already helping me by being alive. She didn't know it yet, but the boy who once slept on her back while she sold food by the roadside was already carrying something far heavier, the weight of a destiny that would change everything. By the time Daniel turned 7, the roadside stall had become a classroom of its own. While Ao served food, Daniel sat nearby with a worn notebook, scribbling numbers endlessly. He solved problems no one gave him, drew patterns that only made sense to him, and corrected adults without fear. Mummy, he said one afternoon, pointing at her notebook. If you buy ingredients in bulk, you'll save more money. Ao laughed in disbelief. Who taught you that? You did, he replied simply. By surviving. Word began to spread in his school. Teachers argued over his answer sheets, thinking mistakes had been made. A 7-year-old shouldn't solve questions meant for teenagers. But Daniel did. One hot afternoon, a neatly dressed woman and 2 men arrived at the school. They asked to meet Daniel's mother. Ao came straight from the roadside. Apron stained, hands smelling of pepper and onions, slippers dusty. She almost turned back when she saw them. These people are not for someone like me, she whispered to herself. Inside the small office, they asked Daniel questions. Hard questions. International questions. He answered calmly. Numbers danced. Logic flowed. The room fell silent. We would like to recommend your son for a full scholarship, one of the men said at last. Abroad. The word hit Ao like thunder. Abroad? Her legs weakened. Her heart raced. Fear wrapped around her excitement like chains. How much? She asked quietly. Nothing, the woman replied gently. Everything is covered. That night, Ao didn't sleep. She watched Daniel breathe and felt her chest tighten. Sending him away felt like tearing her heart out with her own hands. But keeping him back felt like killing his future slowly. In the morning, she knelt beside him. Daniel, she said, voice trembling. You may have to go far away to study. He looked at her seriously. Will you be okay? She swallowed hard and forced a smile. Yes. Then I will go, he said. And I will come back for you. At the airport, Ao held him so tightly people stared. She slipped a small folded paper into his pocket. Inside it were just 5 words. Don't forget where you came from. As the plane lifted into the sky, Ao collapsed onto the airport floor and cried. Not because she was losing her son, but because she knew she had just released him to the world. Back at the roadside, customers noticed something different. Ao stood straighter. She cooked with more purpose. Because somewhere beyond the clouds, the boy born on bare cement was about to rewrite his story. And she believed, more than ever, that the promise she made years ago was finally unfolding. The first night Daniel spent away from home, Ao did not sleep. The uncompleted building felt colder, wider, emptier. Every sound echoed. Footsteps outside, wind through broken blocks, distant traffic. She kept imagining Daniel calling her, asking for water, asking for food, asking where she was. But the room stayed silent. In another part of the world, Daniel lay on a soft bed for the first time in his life. White walls, warm blankets, quiet. The silence scared him too. He clutched the folded paper his mother had given him and read it again. Don't forget where you came from. At school abroad, everything was different. The classrooms were clean and bright. The books were new. The teachers spoke with accents he struggled to understand at first. His classmates came from rich homes, confident and loud. Daniel was quiet, but when numbers appeared on the board, the noise stopped. Within weeks, teachers noticed him. By the first term, he topped his class. By the second, he was competing with students far older than him and winning. Awards came, certificates, recognition. But every success made him think of one thing. His mother. Back in Nigeria, Ao worked harder than ever. She expanded her roadside food business, waking before dawn, returning late at night. Some days she smiled. Some days she cried quietly while stirring stew. Whenever letters or calls came from Daniel's school, she held the phone with shaking hands. Mummy, I am fine, he said every time. I'm learning a lot. She never told him about her struggles. She never told him when sales were poor or when she went to bed hungry. Just focus, she always said. That is my happiness. Years passed. Daniel grew taller, sharper, stronger. At 19, he stood inside the grand halls of Cambridge University, wearing a graduation gown that felt heavier than gold. He had graduated among the best. His name spoken with respect. His brilliance documented in records that would last decades. But the proudest moment of his life was not the applause. It was the ticket. From the money he saved through research work, internships, and grants, Daniel bought a flight ticket. For his mother. Ao had never been on a plane. She trembled the entire journey, clutching her handbag like a shield. When she arrived at Cambridge and saw the tall buildings, the polished floors, the students in gowns, she froze. "This place is not for me," she whispered. Daniel ran to her and hugged her tightly. "It is for you," he said. "Everything I am started with you." As he walked across the graduation stage, Ao stood up without realizing it. Tears streamed down her face as she clapped until her hands hurt. She remembered oranges, cement floors, hunger, and she realized the promise had crossed oceans. Daniel's journey was only beginning, but one thing was already certain. A mother's sacrifice had rewritten destiny. After Cambridge, the world opened its doors to Daniel. Top organizations fought for his mind. Global firms, research institutes, financial giants, names Ao could barely pronounce, sent offers with figures that once sounded impossible. Daniel worked with focus and humility, moving from one remarkable achievement to another, earning salaries that could change generations. But no matter how high he rose, his heart remained in one place: Nigeria. Every night, after long hours in glass offices and quiet apartments, Daniel called his mother. "Mummy, have you eaten?" "Yes," Ao would lie, smiling into the phone. One evening at 23, Daniel surprised her. "I'm coming home," he said. She froze. "Home?" "Yes, it's time." He returned not as the hungry boy who once slept in an uncompleted building, but as a young man with vision burning in his eyes. He invested his savings, gathered brilliant minds, and started his own company, rooted in technology, finance, and innovation. The beginning was rough. People doubted him. Banks hesitated. Old men laughed at his age. But Daniel had survived hunger, loneliness, and foreign lands. Doubt was nothing new. He worked day and night. He built systems. He trusted numbers the way others trusted luck. Ao watched from the sidelines, pride swelling quietly in her chest. She still cooked, still worked, still lived simply. By 30, the headlines changed. Young Nigerian CEO enters billionaire status. Daniel Ao, the mind behind Africa's fastest-growing company. At the grand opening of his company's headquarters, cameras flashed. Politicians arrived. Influential figures stood waiting. Daniel walked to the stage, and instead of speaking, he called someone forward. His mother. Ao stepped out, confused, wearing a simple dress among expensive suits. The room fell silent. "This woman," Daniel said, his voice steady but heavy with emotion, "was thrown out of her home at 19. She slept on bare cement so I could live. She sold oranges, cooked food by the roadside, and starved so I could dream." Tears filled Ao's eyes. "Everything I am," he continued, "is because she never stopped believing." The crowd rose to their feet. In that moment, Ao saw it clearly. The uncompleted building had become skyscrapers. The oranges had become empires. The promise had become prophecy. And as Daniel hugged his mother, the boy who was once carried on her back stood tall, a king who never forgot his roots. This is more than a story of wealth. It is a story of a mother's sacrifice, a child's destiny, and the power of unshakable belief. From an uncompleted building to billionaire boardrooms. From selling oranges by the roadside to owning skyscrapers. From rejection to global recognition. Ao's faith turned pain into purpose. Daniel's brilliance turned struggle into legacy. Let this story remind you, where you start does not define where you end. One promise, one sacrifice, one determined heart can change generations. If the story touched your heart, like this video, if you believe in rising from nothing to greatness, subscribe for more powerful African success stories, inspirational journeys, and life-changing narratives. More stories are coming, and the next one might feel like your own.